awesome to be with you here today. I'm here to talk to you about the generative API integrations and how you would leverage them in product management. My name is Raj Rikhy. I am a, I am a product manager, and I want to do something interesting here today. I asked the ether, I asked the machines, tell me about Raj. What is this? So on the left side is actually an output from Gemini. That's what Gemini Pro has put out about me. And so let's take a look. I apparently am an experienced technical product leader. I guess that's true. I've had the opportunity to work at Microsoft, IBM, Salesforce, a bunch of smaller startups. I've been working now in the AI/ML domain for several years now in various different formats. This was not captured here by Gemini. That's okay. My work has spun the gamut between building ML platforms into deep reinforcement learning, all the way now extending through to generative AI at Microsoft as well. I'm a volunteer PM instructor. That's funny. It magically hallucinated at General Assembly. I have no idea how that happened, but I did teach at product school. Let's see. Oh yeah, and I did also want to call out. I asked Bing Copilot, if you haven't used it, please do so. Not necessarily because I work at Microsoft, okay? It has amazing capability as far as information retrieval from the web, and I've definitely seen some of those things limited in other platforms. But I asked it specifically, hey, can you generate me logos of some of the places I've worked? It did an okay job. All right, it did an okay job. All right, no, so with that, let's kind of jump in here. What are we trying to do here today? The idea is to talk about how do we harness generative AI as a PM, and what does that actually look like, right? So in your day to day, I can almost, I'll bet my bottom dollar you are using tools like ChatGPT to generate content, whether it's emails, whether it's PRDs, whether it's something as simple as user stories, right? And you're here today to learn about the next step function in making use of generative AI. And the intent here is to talk about this holistically in context and how you bridge the gap between where you are today and usage of generative AI and how you take that next step in integrating it with product development. So if you aren't, quick recap, right? Generative AI is all about using advanced algorithms for creation, for the purpose of creation, whether it's text, images, videos, etc. Right? And when you think about how to use that in context with product development, it's really about pushing the pedal to the metal in terms of not only picking up new innovations and ideating different experiences, different pathways, but also trying to quickly brainstorm and actually even refine whatever language you're providing to the customer or maybe even internally. And the idea is, in applying generative AI, that you can be more efficient, right? Instead of typing it out yourself, instead of creating those things yourself, it can help accelerate that motive or that motion. Okay, a few product development trends of generative AI that I've seen personally, right? Integrating these algorithms allows you to personalize experience for users, right? It automates, several different types of tasks. You can create predictive analytics, right? So, with this, let's kind of take a step back, right? So most folks are familiar with like the usage of the base models, right? ChatGPT and the like. Now, if you're trying to customize large language models, when I say in the beginning, it's really in quotes, in the beginning, right? So this is like a couple of years ago when this started. Really, you had two options. So either you were going to go down the path of fine-tuning your model, of which, you would obviously require GPUs, you'd require data sets, you'd really try and take something off the shelf and tune it to what you need. So that was kind of one area of investigation and work for customizing an LLM to your application, right? The other way would be for prompt tuning or prompt engineering. right? And there are many, many different techniques now. I mean, literally, like I would say even tens or maybe even hundreds of techniques for prompt engineering. Things like zero shot, few shot, chain of thought, tree of thought, just a phenomenal number of different techniques out there. But really, it started with the exercise of how do I get the AI to provide the kind of output that I am looking for, right? And using the prompts to do that. So that ended up evolving into much more complicated and much more sophisticated approaches. So now we have very unique techniques such as PEFQ-LoRa. What is PEFQ-LoRa? It's a bunch of letters like on a screen, right? So instead of having to retrain a model from scratch, you have the ability to swap out the weights of a model for your application. What does that mean? I'm not going to go too deep into the details of fine tuning or customization, but I do think it's important to get some background here. Okay. So originally, folks were trying to say, well, maybe we train the entire model, right? And we're going to have to retrain from scratch. Well, this innovation called parameter efficient fine tuning came about, where instead of having to retrain the entire model, people realized you don't have to do that because about 90% of what's actually trained inside of the model is swappable. So you can actually train a little bit of a model here and then swap it with this other smaller model, and it'll do just fine. It'll do just what you want. Fascinating techniques area of research. Strongly recommend folks take a look at it. But it still requires you to train models. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, same thing, prompt engineering, tons of different techniques. So many different techniques. You could honestly create an entire curriculum of different techniques that you can use in prompt engineering for different use cases. Instead of learning both of these things, or either of them, or applying, each of them to varying degrees, what if you wanted both, right? What if you wanted the benefits of customized output, as well as the ability to try and provide some baked in or meta instructions to the model? Right, fine tuning is pretty expensive. It's pretty exhaustive. I have to figure out GPUs, data sets, and all that kind of stuff. And prompt engineering, like I mentioned, you could write a book about it, read a book about it, and still might not know how to do it. Right. So hosted providers like OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, right? They give us the ability to provide meta prompts or instructions to the GPT model and call some built-in functionalities, like, as an example, a code interpreter. So if folks are familiar, with things like GitHub Copilot, right? Where you're generating code as you're typing, or if you've seen, it's a good one, right? It's a good one. A Bing Copilot, right? What does Bing Copilot do? I'm going to keep talking about it, but I have familiarity with it, right? So what does Bing Copilot do? You provided a prompt, and then it goes and retrieves a URL, right? It's not just providing you generated output. It's actually going through, retrieving a link, and providing not only a citation, but also the actual link itself that you can go click. This is called function calling or tool use. And we are going to talk about this today. In the scope of using an LLM, in the scope of using generative AI, you have built-in API integrations for the purpose of out of the box, of using out of the box functionality, like, for example, link retrieval, the ones that I just mentioned, right? And we call them function calling or tool use. There's another option for customizing GPT output, as I've mentioned here, which is like custom GPTs. That's going to be, focus of the workshop. We're going to talk about that a bit later. But for now, I want to focus on specifically, what is a function call? What is tool use, right? Now, these are interchangeable. We kind of talk about them in the same way. You can either say, oh, I want to make a function call, or I want to use a tool, etc. But the key here is think about it like a Swiss Army knife, right? What do you use a Swiss Army knife for? It's a knife, right? It's got a knife. You're going to cut things with it. But a Swiss Army knife has a bunch of other things that come along with it. You see a compass here, magnifying glass, there are pliers, right? So these inbuilt pieces of functionality that come alongside, what is something that's already valuable, a knife, and you can use them in tandem, right? So you can cut something and then you can take out the needle function and sew with it as well, right? So what is a function call from an LLM? What does it look like? Now, I know that this is going to be somewhat technical for a little bit. Just stick with me, okay? So if I'm a user, I'm going to provide a prompt to the LLM. That prompt is then going to go to an agent, something that is, operating behind the scenes, and it's going to take that prompt and it's going to think, okay, well, you've asked me, as an example user, you've asked me what the weather is today. Well, I could do a couple of things here. I could completely and entirely hallucinate the weather because I have no idea where you are. And I can tell you that it's sunny outside when it's actually a blizzard, right? Or if I have been given the tool, if I've been given the function to then go and ask, as an example, weather.com, hey, what's the weather today, right? I'm going to take that prompt and I'm going to say, all right, well, I'm going to go see weather.com. Can you tell me what that weather is? And as you can see here, it takes that chosen function, like, for example, calling weather.com as an API call, takes the parameterized values. Let's say in this case, those are things like temperature, right? Wind, humidity, etc. It sends it back to the agent and it determines, okay, hey, this is the payload that I've got. I went and I consulted with weather.com. This is the information that I have. It passes that back to the model. So it makes sure that it wraps, this information it's got to weather.com with, hey, LLM, I have this information. How do you want to present this to the user? What is this going to look like? Right? So the LLM can choose to say things like, hey, user, it's actually sunny outside today. I checked the weather and it's 75 degrees and balmy. Wonderful, right? And that's the prompt response, right? That's the information from weather.com goes back to the model. The model wraps it up with an intelligible response, returns it back to the user, records it, by the way, in memory. Let's say, for example, you wanted to store it, like, how ChatGPT, if you ask questions, there will be, like, oh yeah, you asked me about the weather in, say, California. Right? So it'll record that, and then it returns that final response back to the user. There's a lot of operations there, right? It's going back and forth. It's wondering, okay, how do I get the right API? What kind of information can I feed through? Where do I get it from? Right? And all of this happens via the exposed API from function call. Okay, all right. Let's move on to this next one. Now, I recognize that what you are staring at is a JSON schema. I know it's somewhat scary if you're not familiar with if you're not familiar with working with this, but it's important to kind of know what the structure of this would look like. Now, I just talked about retrieving the weather. So in context, let's look at this snippet of JSON, right? So we've declared it as a function. The name of that function is get the current weather, right? And as I mentioned, what are the parameters that you're passing with this call? Meaning, what are the descriptions, the details that come along with this call that you're sending over through to this function? So things like the city and state, right? How are you going to return the values back to the user? Things like Celsius and Fahrenheit. And you'll see at the bottom, it's requiring location. So this is a very detailed and granular way to describe the necessary information that an LLM would need to successfully pass the information back to the user. So if I didn't have, as an example, a function like get current weather, and I just said, LLM, go to weather.com, right? I didn't describe, I didn't have a description of the city and state. I didn't have the units to return. How would you communicate weather without Celsius and Fahrenheit, right? So this JSON schema allows us not only the flexibility, but it gives us a powerful syntax to describe to the LLM how, where, and what we want to return the information to the user. This, as you see here, this specifically is what a function called declaration looks like in the context of an LLM. Now, I want to take a step back and pause, because I just showed you JSON schema, right? I know that usually when I start showing code to folks, people's eyes start glazing over, and it's like, oh my God, what is happening? Why are you showing me this mess? What is this blob? Well, this is where this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Okay, when it comes to AI product management, or even when it comes to really deep technical product management, understanding even at a surface level, right? Even if you're not going beneath and you've never seen, JSON schema, Python code, API applications, whatnot, understanding the how helps you pick up and articulate the what and the why. Your role as a product manager is to communicate, and communication happens both ways. It happens not only to your customers, but it also happens to your engineering team. And therefore, if you're clearly able to articulate, listen, we want to make sure, as an example, that we are maximizing the use of the LLM through grounding it in different APIs, external pieces of information, right? Knowledge about how this works will help you not only clearly articulate the value to your customers by crystallizing in a way that makes sense to them. Hey, I'm always going to give you the right weather. But it helps you by clearly structuring the information you provide to your engineering team as well. We should investigate function calling. Now, there is a course, I believe, AI product management, that goes through in detail the skills that you would need, not only to understand some of the technical aspects that are associated with AI implementation, but also some of the critical learning and I want to say, like technical pieces of information that you would need to know to maximize the use of AI effectively, right? And that's part of the reason why you're attending this webinar, but it's also the reason why you want to deepen your knowledge base. It's not just about staring code. You don't need to be an engineer, but knowing the how helps you better articulate the what and the why. All right, okay. I am going to really quick talk about the OpenAI Assistant API, which wraps tool and function use. I'm going to take a pause for questions. I see some in the chat, and then we'll see if we'll dive into the workshop in a bit. So, all right. So what is the Assistant API? So by the way, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or get ready to raise your hands or whatever, and we can talk about it. I know I'm covering a lot of information, so we'll take a quick brain break after this. Okay. So what is the Assistant API? So the Assistant API exposed by OpenAI is a way that OpenAI has basically said, we have these GPT models. We've got, GPT-4, T, 4 Omni, et cetera. In order for you to make use of these other inbuilt, Swiss Army knife functionalities, like calling external APIs, or being able to read, understand, and output code, we've given you a bunch of these tools, and we wrap them up in this API called the OpenAI Assistant API. So it's easy for you to integrate, right? So the idea is that if you're trying to talk to these GPT models, all you need to do is describe to OpenAI, like, look, I want to use this model, GPT-4o, okay? These are the tools, these are the functions that I want. Like, for example, you saw the one earlier, get current weather. Okay, so you do have to actually have code and implement code in order to successfully use these APIs. That's important to know. All right, and then the idea is that you create the assistant. Now, as I mentioned, you get the JSON schema, you pick the model GPT-4o, you enable those tools. And you saw that thread of conversation, that infograph that I said earlier, right? So you initiate a message, let's say, for example, the prompt, et cetera. This isn't something that you would do, but this is kind of like the system, how it works in the back end, right? It creates a thread, starts a conversation, adds some messages, like, for example, here's the weather, then it goes back, bounces back and forth, and then it returns those messages back to the user, using the model and the tools that it has access to. All right, okay. Let me pause here. I think I saw one question in the chat. I don't know if Zoom has raising hands. Can Zoom raise hands? Is that a thing?
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And
All right. Okay.
one thing I would
Go ahead.
quickly add, sorry to interrupt, for those committee members that are attending the session for the first time, because they're part of the cohort 6 of the AI Product Manager Learning Program, and you're wondering what's going on, don't worry, you're jumping into the swimming pool and learning how to swim, power through it, everything will make sense eventually. You'll have all the content to review again in a couple of months, but this is the best way to learn, just like get your hands dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. So let's see. I have one question here in the chat. How does it reconcile the idea of quality? What is quality versus its own hallucination? Is the LLM just functioning as a natural language interface? Oh, this is a fascinating question. Okay, there are a couple of things that are important to break down in this question. Scott, thank you for asking this. Okay, so first of all, when we as humans, I'm not even talking about PMs, I'm not even talking about engineers, when we as humans review the output that comes from the LLM and it's false, we have termed that falsity to be a hallucination or fabrication. In fact, and there's a very famous kind of like series of blog posts about this. In fact, hallucinations and fabrications are the very capability that we have designed and engineered these algorithms to provide. Now, if you understand the attention mechanism, right, that's behind an LLM, and I know I'm getting a little bit more technical here, but think about how these GPT things were created, right? The way I always describe this massive new innovation that we've had about generative AI, it's like, what were we doing before and what were we doing today? Okay, what are we doing today? What we are doing today is we're predicting the next word or predicting the next phrase with a high probability of accuracy. Okay, for those of you, for my friends on the call that are in the United States, and I'm not stereotyping here, but I am gonna borrow an anecdote. If you meet someone for the first time in the United States with 99% probability, what are they going to say? I am going to give you the answer. Hi, how are you? Okay, here's the deal. It is a very high probability that we can predict the next set of words from the current set of words. And it is a almost certainty that even if you're predicting accurately, the next set of words are fundamentally wrong. This is why, in concert with this fundamental new innovation that we call generative AI and large language models, we have accompanied a huge additional set of other types of innovations, things like retrieval augmented generation, things like function calling, where we can ground the responses of an LLM in real data that is out there in the internet. Things like, as an example, and I'm not going to get into the details of this, but like ChatGPT is this really fancy thing called RLHF, which it can take input responses from millions of people and actually refine its own answers. That's like a whole talk unto itself. I'm not going to talk about it today. But yeah, but that's why we don't just put these algorithms out there in the wild. We accompany them with all of these different types of techniques and all these different types of tools. And so the LLM itself cannot actually differentiate today, unless you accompany it with all these other kinds of things, what is true and what is not, because the fundamental capability of the LLM is, in fact, to hallucinate. That's what we asked it to do. Okay, let me move on. Hopefully that answered your question. It's all hallucination. This is how they work. Look, this guy's getting it. There you go. Yes, and that's why. And again, this is techniques for another time. I'm not going to go into RAG or any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, okay, all right, good. Okay, any other questions? Folks want to raise their hands? Feel free, take the opportunity. And if not, that's also completely fine. We are going to move on. All right, okay, let's go on. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to, let's do a quick time check here. 9:30. All right, so you know what? Let's hop to the workshop. And then after the workshop, I'm going to pipe back because once the workshop is completed, I want to share with you. I want to share with you how you would apply the AI in a product management context. Okay. And real quick, what we're going to do here, the workshop is going to be building your own custom GPT. So hopefully, folks, Bijan, I appreciate you at the top of the call. Hopefully, you have a ChatGPT Plus subscription. If not, that's okay. I will go ahead and demonstrate what that looks like here in terms of building your own GPT. But what I have today is to walk through a GPT builder. And what is a GPT? But what are we doing here, right? A custom GPT is different than using the Assistant API. A custom GPT is located in ChatGPT proper, right? So it's not a programmatic extension of a model. It is actually it's like a subsection of the model, if you will, right? You're like providing these meta instructions and you're, creating this little tiny box over here. This is my GPT, right? And so you have the same built-in UI that you would with ChatGPT, only you're providing very specific, descriptions of behavior and how it should work. And these are also hosted by OpenAI. So you can't, you're not going to extend it. As an example, let's say you integrated, a GPT-4T, and you're calling it directly from inside of your application, right? You can't mix the two. So if you're calling it programmatically, you have to work with it programmatically. If you're using ChatGPT, custom GPTs, you have to work inside the GPT interface. But it does have built-in tools. You can do things like web browsing. You can have DALL-E, which is image generation. You can have code interpreter, and you can also have custom actions too that are available to you. All right, so let's jump in here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and paste this and put this in the chat as well, so folks have. Let's see. Where is my Zoom editor? Hang on a second. I'm trying to find this
hamburger button and then the horizontal hamburger button and then press that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then I'll post it on LinkedIn too.
Okay. All right, great. Found it. Wow. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned maybe earlier, I am a Teams person. I do the Teams all the times. And so, okay. All right. Okay, can everybody see what I just posted in the chat here? Excellent. Okay. Now, please feel free to follow along. We're going to cap this exercise to about 10 minutes here. The idea is that you can do this yourself, or you can follow along with me. And let me just share my screen properly so you guys can see this. All right. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Yeah. So if you are following along at home, you can just simply disregard what I'm doing. Don't worry about it. Go your own path. We'll check in again in about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. Otherwise, what we're going to do here is we are going to follow along as I do it if you don't have a ChatGPT subscription. Okay. And so this is the ChatGPT builder. This is the editor. This is the initial prompt, right? Like you can say something like make a creative, these are the system or meta instructions that you would otherwise have in ChatGPT. Only the difference is we're bounding this in the scope of not just this conversation or this session or this local persona. We're giving this as a GPT for other people, right? And the exercise that we're doing here is that we want to create a GPT that writes product requirement documents. We're gonna make our own lives easier here. We're gonna have a GPT that does PM work. Isn't that great? Oops. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, okay, fascinating. Let's try this again. Maybe it's an internet issue. Okay. I would like to create a GPT that writes product requirement documents. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is this is what's going on. So now it is setting up, it's saying I'm setting up a GPT, a product requirements writer. This is actually quite kind of interesting, because what you'll see here is it's providing very detailed system instructions. It's just generating them for the GPT. All I did was I just added, hey, like I want to write PRDs. The reason why this is more interesting than what's output here is, and we're not going to cover this in this session, but I do want to touch on it because I think it's useful for everyone to know here. The field as a whole is moving towards the concept of disaggregated agents. Okay, so instead of just thinking about like, oh, I've got this model over here and this model is doing things and spitting things out, as almost, it's kind of it's fascinating. Universally, folks are moving toward the idea that you have agents that take actions and operate independently. And what you'll see here is actually almost very similar to just an agent instruction, right? It's going through, it's creating all this information and it's creating a GPT. But actually, if you wanted to programmatically create this, you would have the same exact, almost identically, the same exact description for an agent. Okay, cool. Now, what do I want to do here? This is really nice. Shall we proceed with the setup? Yes. I don't necessarily want to proceed just yet. I want to configure it. I'd like to name my GPT PRD GPT. I like that. Look at that. PRD GPT. What is this? What does the GPT do? Automates my product management specification creation, and do my job. All right. Instructions. Okay, so these are additional meta instructions. Okay. How should this behave? What should it avoid doing? Right. So these are other types of constraints. One thing I will note is whenever you're providing instructions, both via prompt and via meta prompts, and meta prompts are like these like system instructions, right? These are things you tell the GPT. It is equally as valuable to provide things that you want the GPT to do as it is to provide information that you do not want the GPT to do. Most people skip over that last part. Please do not include technical details to a great degree in my PRDs. All right, and here we go, conversation starters, like, what would you like to build today? And as you can see here, right, this is like a starter prompt. When you open ChatGPT, this is what people can see as they're getting started. You can just, oh, hey, this is how you can get things moving, right? Oh boy, ChatGPT is not being nice with me today. That's okay. You can also create actions. Oh, this isn't so this is as an example, right? This is what I was talking earlier about. A custom GPT can also embed function calls. It does not look like the JSON declaration that I had previously. This here actually is in fact a function call. I can provide, let's say an authentication mechanism. I can say like, hey, I kind of want you to hook into Google Drive, and I'd like you to grab Google Docs. Can you do that? Right? And this is a way that you can do that using actions inside of the GPT. Don't use that exact example, but I am telling you that this is a capability you can use inside of a custom GPT as well. So importing from the URL, this is a JSON schema. As I mentioned, the OpenAI schema. This is the same thing we saw earlier, that the tool use schema. All right, now to simplify things, let's go ahead, just go back and just say like, yes, this is great. All right. And it is going to go through, it's going to configure that GPT, and then I can now, as you see here, you see on the right-hand side, this create button actually just changed. And so what I can do is I can hit create, and now I can actually share this. Now, you'll have to access this. Remember, this is accessed via the ChatGPT interface. So I can share this with myself. I can share it with Anybody with a link can access it, or I can publish this in the GPT store, right? That is a unique functionality that ChatGPT has, actually, or I should say OpenAI has as well. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do me. And then now I have a custom GPT published, and I can use it just fine. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? All right. Okay, I'm going to check in now. Let me return back to my PowerPoint here. Okay. How are folks doing? Any hiccups, questions? It looks like there's a bunch in the chat. Okay. Right. Isn't it an agent? Yes. Yes, in fact, it is. It is. I don't want to get too deep into this because this can be its own conversation and is absolutely fascinating. I highly recommend after this conversation, you go and check out your own volition, a repository called AutoGPT. Strongly recommend. I am going to do a disservice by talking about agents in details here. Okay, all right. Do meta prompts get higher weights? That is yeah. So no. The answer to that question is no. But the way that the weights are constructed at inference time, I'm going to answer this question was asked a technical way, so I'm going to answer it a technical way. The weights that are constructed at inference time based on the input prompt will change based on the meta instructions that come with the user input prompt. Okay, all right. Any other questions before we wrap this workshop? Does anybody want to present? Has anybody actually done the exercise and wants to show us what their GPT looks like? No. Okay. All right. Demonstrating the API side. I'll connect to another service with this GPT. Okay. Oh, Silvio, please feel free. Yeah, if you want to present, show us what you built.
Yeah, I'm doing the exercise, but I not finished yet.
Oh, okay. That's totally fine.
I mean, it took me a while to a second to subscribe. I think I have something. I don't know if it's the right thing that I have, but at least I've tried. I can share.
Please. Yeah, please feel free. Don't be shy.
I think what went differently, yeah, I don't know if you want to share a screen or what went differently is that it started, I think I copied the instructions from the chat, and part of it was a blank, so it started to ask me all of these questions. I think this was the wrong part. I should have put the requirements. So yeah, I mean, this is what I've got. Awesome. I don't know. I haven't, and then I've tried it, so I don't know how to go back to the initial prompt page.
I think you have to flip over to create it on the left side. Yeah, there you go.
No, I meant like so that the prompt will be back to the here.
Oh yeah. So yeah, what you need to do, because this is a preview, is you either have to scroll up or create and publish this, and then it'll show like the initial things. You can go and edit it later. So if you go to only me, right?
Okay.
And then hit share, right? What it's going to do is it's going to publish that, and then on the left-hand side, you'll see the actual GPT, right? And that'll take you to the actual. There you go. So now you're back to the original thing. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Thank you. That was awesome. Okay, I am going to go through and actually talk about what may be relevant to a bunch of folks, which is how do I use this? Thank you for all this information. I am very grateful for you sharing me all this information. What do I do with it? Right? So how do I use this in building products or experiences? Right? So here's the deal. If you are looking to use the capability of LLMs to integrate to external APIs for retrieval of information, you can do it one of two ways. You can obviously do this through vectorized databases and retrieval augmented generation. That's one way to do it, creating an index of links. We'll leave that aside for now. But to do it easily and to find granular functionality, like for example, retrieving weather, retrieving, as an example, internal information specific to a user, or you have product documentation that you want to provide back to the user, let's say in a specific context, either in like a modal inside of your website, or even if you're sending an email to a customer, this is a great way to leverage the Assistant API and function calling, because you have the ability to return this information. Now, let's say, for example, you have a knowledge base, or this is a really, really common use case, okay? If you want to take a natural language prompt and convert that to a query, right? To fetch into the database, right? That is something that you can do using function calling. Now, why am I saying that? What is this, a bunch of like technical stuff again? Come on, Raj, get with it, right? You want to provide specific, accurate answers to a user based on a question. So as an example, let's say you have a chatbot for, as an example, I made all of these up, by the way. These are all hallucinations, right? I have a chatbot for Credit Karma, and I want to return specific results about your purchase history, right? Like, hey, how much did I spend on Starbucks, last month, right? And there's a chatbot that you can interact with, because I have these questions. I don't know about you. I'm curious. I really like espresso, right? I want to know, hey, how much did I spend in Starbucks last month? You have the ability to go in, take that prompt, convert it into a SQL query using a function call schema, and retrieve that information from the DB specific to the user and provide it back to them. Hey, Raj, you spent $500 on Starbucks last month. User does not have to search for it. Amazing capability. Okay, we're going to talk about a few different contexts here, right? So that's as an example in the scope of like a chatbot experience. Another one, let's say you don't have a chatbot. Let's say that you have support ticketing mechanism, right? You have a support assistant, you have a Shopify store, and customer sends in an email like, hey, I want to return this. Well, you can kick off, let's say, for example, you didn't want to make them go through a form. They just created a support ticket. They sent you an email. You can have an agent, you can have an LLM, a response that goes through, initiates that return for the customer, figures out what that item is, retrieves it from the database for the specific order number, and starts that process for that customer. And it can all be done asynchronously inside of an email thread. You don't actually have to respond back as a chat. It can reply back as an API that you embed inside of that email. Well, here's another one. Let's say you're not doing B2C. Let's say you're doing enterprise, right? In enterprise, what often is the case is you'll run into RFQs, right? Folks will have many different types of and what is an RFQ? RFQ, basically folks are trying to get inputs into their specific purchase requisition system, right? So if I want to buy something, there's this whole process of like uploading a PDF that I have to work with. So if you had if folks had RFQs and you wanted to fill them out with relevant information, you can have an upload button. Call that function where it can go and retrieve relevant information for that RFQ, go through, fill out that RFQ, and return it back, right? Because you can define functions granularly. You can have write to PDF. You can have retrieve information. And one thing that I didn't talk about here today is you can parallelize these things too. They don't have to be sequential. I think there's a hand raised. Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one challenge that we see in enterprise world that the information is actually should be cleaned up and removed from PII, right? You don't want to have this information available. First, I don't know when, but I would love to learn what are the easier ways to get to this. Second, all the things you said assumes that you also have access to the true API to this data, right?
Yes.
Like the existing RFQ should be possible to retrieve through API and give it to the agent.
Yeah. So to be clear, right? The function invocation calls that can happen here can be authenticated. Okay. You would have to figure out how to stitch these things together to retrieve information in a secure way, right? Using that authentication mechanism, whether it's some kind of like an OAuth token or a schema or something like that. Okay. But yeah, absolutely, right? instrumenting how this works behind the scenes and how it taps into your data and how you can customize it uniquely for your use case is certainly, one of the ways that you can express this modality, right? And I would strongly encourage you to do that. In fact, you're a great, that's a great setup prompt because this gets me into my next, slides. Like, how do you benefit, right? So you're a PM, right? What are the actions that you're taking, right? So you are summarizing customer feedback. You're out there generating product descriptions, designing surveys, automating tasks, right? How do you uniquely use this in your workflow, customized to whatever your use case is? So, if you're doing all of these things with GPTs today, and you want to build assistant triggers or function calls for yourself, whether it's in the scope of like a custom GPT or whether it's in the scope of like, you want to, let's say, for example, you have the ability or means to build this on behalf of yourself or your team. Like, for example, I want to summarize the customer feedback. I get all this customer feedback on a call, and then I want to feed it directly into our CRM, or I want to enrich it with external data sources, right? I only have the information of the customer that joined the call. This happens to me all the time. I'm joining a customer call. I have no information whatsoever about them. And I record that information somewhere, inside of my, customer notes to share it out. And I wish I could get more. I wish I could say, this is this persona. This is where this person is coming from. Can't do any of that stuff, right? Another way to do this is if you're designing, surveys or interview questions, one thing that you can do is you can integrate with, you can have that survey integrate with a research platform, or you can analyze those responses in real time. Like once those are, once the survey comes in, trigger a function call from the LLM that goes through, retrieves the information from that survey, and does an analysis and feeds it up into some all-up dashboard. And this is all things that you can do for yourself, or for your own workflow. I think there's a thing in the chat here. Let's see. What about privacy? Oh, yeah. Definitely, that's something to keep and to bear in mind. One thing I will call out is anything that you feed to the model, with some exceptions, certainly. I think there are enterprise use cases, like if you have a license, as an example, with Copilot, right? That information is retained within your enterprise. And so I think, I don't actually know this with certainty or not, but I think there's similar covenants with Google, but I don't actually know that for a fact. But anything that you feed, okay, to ChatGPT or even elsewhere, I will caution you, even elsewhere, okay, if it's just public, I'm accessing ChatGPT or some model on Hugging Face or whatever, right? Just be careful of what you feed there. Not only could it potentially be used, if it's just public information and there's no other kind of like agreement or anything like that, for training data, there was a leak about a year ago where ChatGPT was sharing chats between sessions. Okay, so it's important to know. All right. Okay, I'm running a little short on time, so I'm going to try and
quickly ask one of the questions that are posted in the community. Is that okay? On the
of course.
Side? Just want to
of course
one question from them. So Shalene is asking, how do we have the interface, the conversation interface outside of GPT? Basically outside the ChatGPT. And I think you talked briefly about this, but you might want to explain it a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, so that is a good question. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's what I'm looking at now, right? I'm looking at ChatGPT here on my screen, right? And ChatGPT it's a product. It is outright an interface that I use. If I wanted to create that custom GPT, it would have to be resident inside of this product. Okay. If I want to have a similar type of functionality, I can do one of two things. I can either pull something off the shelf, like I can take a model and integrate it into a I can have my own chat-like interface that I've built. That's another way to do it. Okay, so you're actually just sending responses back and forth to the model. So that's an API integration at the back end, and you've built the front end yourself. Okay, that's kind of one of the really the only ways to customize in that sense. The other thing you can also do is you can use, so Hugging Face actually has a bunch of models off the shelf. Okay, these are all open source models you can use. If you didn't want to use one of the hosted providers, you could also use an open source model to power it. I would be remiss if I did not say that you can also choose to use something along the lines like Azure Copilot Studio, right? Or Microsoft Copilot Studio, I should say, to build your own Copilot as well. That's another way that you can expose Copilots, or even, you know, whatever you want to call it, the chat interface type thing that you've customized. This is one great way that you can actually get that same experience without having to deal with API integrations. So those are all kind of different techniques that you can use. Any other questions, Bijan, from the community?
There are more, but we can continue. I know we're short on time. Go ahead.
We are running a little short. Okay, so I'm just going to cover a couple of quick things here. These are some future possibilities that you could have with the Assistant API. So things like real-time data retrieval. As I mentioned, for instant responses, these are extensions beyond simply having like function call definitions. These are things that like I've, you know, thought about, and I think I'd love to see, you know, applications on. You know, advanced data processing, real-time insights, stitching together, parallelizing functions. You can have end-to-end workflows. Like, for example, you know, create a document, enter things into the document, retrieve information for that document, publish that document. You know, the possibilities really are endless here. Okay, and what I'm posting here is the Berkeley function calling leaderboard, which is pretty cool. Okay, if folks are familiar with like the benchmarks that are tied, you know, that models are evaluated against, like Blue and things like that, right? There's a bunch of these like leaderboards and things that you stack rank stuff. This is a way to go through and see like what are the models that have function call capabilities, and how are they performing? And do I have that slide? Yeah. So, and these are some other ones that you can use outside of OpenAI that offer this capability. So Anthropic, so Claude actually has function calling capability in beta. Gemini offers function calling as well. Mixtral, Llama, actually Llama does not have, yeah, I put it on the slide. Llama does not have function calling, in fact. And Gorilla was an open source model that actually was built kind of from the ground up with function calling in mind. Has a bunch of different API integrations that you can have out of the gate as well. Okay, two more things, and then I'm going to open for questions. Oh, actually, I don't have time. Okay, I won't cover LangChain or semantic kernel. That's fine. Okay, as a PM, how do you apply this? What are the next steps? What do you do? Okay, so this is the flow that I would really recommend that you apply when you are you're seeking to use this kind of thing in practice, right? Identify the use cases first off, right? Try and use the existing off-the-shelf tools, maybe even like custom GPTs, to prototype whether it'll be accurate for you. Try customizing and optimizing it using, you know, prompt engineering, different types of links, etc. You know, see what it's like to integrate with an existing system first before applying it to a new system. So that's something along the lines of like, hey, if you have like a new API or something like that that's being developed, try and hang off of something that you're familiar with, and apply that API call to that and see if it returns what you expect before applying it to something new. There's like a chain of different things that can, you know, go wrong, series of unfortunate events, right? Make sure that you are maintaining security and compliance. That is something that you want to, especially in the context of business, of applications, always keep in mind. And then, you know, you want to make sure that you're training your teams and educating them. The last thing that you want to do is introduce something that's stochastic, like an LLM model functionality into a system without actually talking to your peer stakeholders. And then obviously monitor and iterate. Okay, all right, that's it. I only have 3 minutes, so questions, answers, you know, whatever I can provide, I'm at your behest. There you go.
I'm gonna place the link to your LinkedIn page here so that in case people want to follow you, they can do that. And on LinkedIn, I think people already have that. You can just go to the event detail and they can find your information.
Awesome. Going once.
All right,
Going
Silvio,
twice.
good idea. We'll do that. Well, let me maybe ask a question from the community, if that's okay with you. Oh, somebody asked if we can provide the link to the AutoGPT repo.
Yes, I can do that. I can do that.
Okay, if you can share it here on the chat, I'll also post it on LinkedIn for them.
Yeah. There you go. 162,000 stars.
Okay, perfect. All right.
A lot.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Okay, perfect. So I've done this. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming in, Raj. This was a really great session. I hope people had a lot of fun. And like I said, if people are like kind of wondering what some of these things mean, don't worry that we try to kind of have everybody just like jump in. And because you'll have access to all the recordings that'll be available in our AI Product Manager community sessions page, you'll be able to actually watch them later. So, and for those of you who are wondering where that link is, here's the link. I just shared it with you. We've got a bunch of sessions that are coming up pretty soon. I think next week we have a presentation from, I forgot the project's name. I think it's called Ethno-Gym, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a very interesting AI first workout app that 2 team members in the last cohort built. I would personally sign up for them as soon as they have it available. I think it's a really interesting idea. Then the week after, we have a workshop on fine-tuning your model. I think that's going to be a really good one. Next week is actually a workshop on RAGs. So that's going to be done by Niraj. It's going to be really interactive. After that, we have a session on the Ethno-Gym. And then the week after, we have a session on fine-tuning your own model. There are more sessions coming up, but for those of you that are interested, we got a couple interesting sessions coming up. Thank you so much again, Raj, for coming on board. Really appreciate you coming in here, giving us this presentation, and hope to see everybody next Friday. Enjoy your Friday evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
So my experience with the cohort was overwhelmingly positive. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I mean, look, this is what we did in 4 weeks. I mean, for me, this is like, wow. In 4 weeks class, we came up with all of this much research, this much understanding, all of it in 4 weeks. That's pretty amazing. And so firstly, how thorough the course is, how you just dive in and really all the deep concepts from the technical side to all of the PM work that you have to do, all of it is covered thoroughly. The technical side especially, it's very easy to kind of gloss over it, but this ML is so technical, you absolutely have to know it on some level. The instructors are very supportive. Kai is a fantastic instructor. Bijan is always available for help. He wants to help you push your career forward, learn as much as possible, just become a great AI PM. And that's 2 hearty thumbs up.